Data storytellers, today on the show, I have with me a very exciting guest, Danielle Gentry. Danielle has been working with our community in the context of our masterclass just recently, and I found that she had a superpower that the world should know about. So we're going to talk about how she cares about her stakeholders. So without further ado, Danielle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and I appreciate the invite. I don't know if I'm super, but we'll see if we get there today.
Yeah, we're here to find out. So, Danielle, you brought a lot of value to the conversation in the masterclass. But for those who are listening to the story and they don't know you yet, what do you do right now over at Thermo Fisher Scientific?
Yeah, right now I lead a team. It's called a marketing science team. So we are an innovative group that is thinking about solutions from a data standpoint, from looking at data science modeling, all the way through to analytics and marketing intelligence. So I'm lucky enough to work with my team and have the opportunity to work with some really innovative individuals. But with that, we have to do a lot of learning about the business. We have to do a lot of understanding pain points and challenges for a variety of different types of individuals, which is really what ties into that relationship aspect of that superpower, where it's so important to understand the people we work with and not just the tasks or the data points that we're trying to crank out on a daily basis.
So before we dive into that playbook, I always like to have the context of what shaped and molded you as a professional. So how did you get into data analytics in the first place?
Yeah, so early on, I studied a mix of marketing and finance thanks to academic, and I had that creative mindset that's where the marketing came into play, but I also was really driven to numbers. And early on in my career, I had the opportunity to leverage both of those and understand what do I really enjoy doing. And I started to understand that data was a passion for me, and solving problems by looking at data and numbers and trying to put all the pieces together, that was fascinating and challenging for me. So that's, as I continue to evolve my own career, I continue to look for opportunities in that area where I could be challenged by data and help businesses solve their problems by understanding what does all this mean and how can we make sense of it.
So it's interesting, and this happens a lot, that you're just passionate about being able to get a unique snapshot of reality that is enabled by technology, which is data analytics, what's actually happening, and can actually work with this and inform decisions. Now, what happens usually is that the challenges tend to fall in a wide spectrum. So what have you seen as the key challenges in this role as you were kind of progressing in this profession? What have you identified as the key barriers to success?
I think with any data role, or any role, there's barriers across every different industry and area, but particularly from my perspective, data has been something that has been a competitive advantage, but also a barrier in many ways, where large companies, even thinking about, the folks that we had in our data storyteller group, where we all were coming together and sharing similar challenges, where we didn't understand how to put the pieces together. So we had all the puzzle pieces, and we know there's this large landscape. We want to get to this end state and end vision. However, there are a lot of opportunities to say, how do you put things together? Or what's the most meaningful set of data? Or as we think about slicing that pie, which piece are we going to pull out and extrapolate and say, this is what makes sense? And, it was actually interesting to learn in our class that we had that this is a common problem across every industry, every market type. Everyone's saying the same thing, which I guess misery loves company in a way. But it's interesting, but also great to see that people are looking to tackle this, and companies are looking to understand, how do we start to make sense of these challenges as we think about putting those pipes together so that we can look at that North Star, we can create that picture, we can put the puzzle together and really accelerate momentum for whatever initiative that you have as part of your strategies.
Absolutely. And yeah, you're right. So after the masterclass, we always catch up with people to see what kind of game plan you will have. How does the blueprint of transformation look like for you? And apart from asking what have you learned, what were your favorite highlights and takeaways, we always ask, like, did you find that others were particularly interested in an approach that you had? And actually, several people said that, yes, the lady from Thermo Fisher Scientific had a really cool approach to building relationships. And when I spoke to you, you also mentioned that people seem to be interested in that. So there's no silver bullet when it comes to these topics. What we always like to do is to take your perspective and then offer it up to the community so that they can implement it in their own business environment. So this question of relationship building, before we again just dive in, why is it so important? So if you had to capture the essence of why should people care? Why should people care about relationship building if you're a data analytics practitioner in a big company?
Yeah, this one, I think about, I'm a parent and I have kids. So, getting a child to do anything is a challenge. At least for me it is. My kids don't listen to me unless I have a good reason for them to listen. And I think about the same thing from a stakeholder perspective. So just because you have the data and just because you have the answers doesn't mean that anyone has to listen or is willing to listen to you. So building that relationship and that trust is critical to saying, I have the data and I have the insights, but they're right for you because I know your pain points. I've established a relationship with you and we have this trust together versus, I have the data. It may not be right. I may not be hitting on the right points because I don't really know you or I don't know your team. But here's the data, just listen to it. And that's not the solution. And that's not a strategy that I would recommend deploying. And I think from a data and analytics perspective, relationship building at times can be, pushed aside because data is so powerful on its own. However, data plus relationships becomes this superpower that you now have the ability to really make meaningful impact aligned with those relationships and networks that you've been able to build.
Absolutely. And I can relate. I'm a parent myself, but I have an impeccable track record so far. Like my daughter listens to whatever I say, even though she's not born yet. Probably yeah. I'll be hit with the challenges when that happens. So so that's very interesting. Why do you think so people who do not achieve those relationships that would enable that basically the data driven way of doing business? Everyone says that, yeah, we want to work with analytics and yes, AI machine learning, of course, bring it on. But what we found is that often it becomes lip service. And the barrier indeed tends to be people are not really bought in. They might be intrigued, they might be curious, but what would really drive them to change how they act and what they do on a daily basis, that data-driven culture, which is a set of beliefs and behaviors, is just not there. So what do you think happens when those relationships are not in place? So again, before we just really zoom in on your model, what is the big risk here? So now more and more money flows into data analytics. People are building amazing things, right? So what is the key pitfall here for a senior data analytics leader, and why should they take this really seriously and consider implementing a proper model to build relationships in a purposeful and choiceful way in a strategic level?
I think that build off of what you said, you can build amazing things in a vacuum, in a silo. So you can invest all this money, you can build your pipeline, and you can deliver it in that meeting with stakeholders or whatever environment that you have. And you say, look at this big thing, it's awesome. If you don't have those relationships and you've done this in a silo without learning about the stakeholders, the group, the functions, you have now gotten to a place and you've risked creating a solution, putting all this manpower behind a solution that doesn't meet the mark. So there could be considerations that you don't see in the data. And there could be considerations that you don't see by getting out in the field and seeing what's going on with the feet on the ground. And all of this is something that needs to be layered in with that relationship factor, that just the sheer build a model or build a data insight without that relationship, those things don't come through from the data point. So the risk from my perspective is you can spend all this time thinking about that next best thing. And in your mind, this is awesome, this is great. you deliver it and it falls flat because you haven't thought of A, B, C, and D. And now you're getting questioned as to, well, why did you build this solution? Because it's not even aligned with what our business needs are. I think that's the biggest risk from my perspective is you invest the time, it falls flat. And now you had a team that you are cheering on, saying, great job, go team, this is what you have to do. And then you go back and deliver a message and say, sorry, it wasn't what we had to do. So now you have a team that's potentially disengaged and they don't feel like they have, that energy and that drive to deliver the next best solution because they just spent all their energy on the prior best solution that fell flat.
Yeah, the stakes are high. And I always like to just lean into what is there to gain and what is there to lose. Yeah. Apart from it being good storytelling practice, it's really good to know what we're up against and why we're doing what we're doing. And then on the flip side of that, I know that we already spoke about this, but then imagine that the other end of the spectrum, especially maybe long-term implications of, no, you do this the right way. You actually manage to build these relationships with the stakeholders early on. You do expose those blind spots and make sure that you build your house on a rock. So what will that enable you to do short, mid, and long term? What kind of opportunities will that open up in the future, you think?
Yeah, I think you build that foundation and you now accelerate. So you build next best thing, time after time after time. And it's not build the foundation, let it break, build the foundation, let it break. It's you continue to build this mansion at the end where you have a joint solution and a joint, endpoint in mind where everyone's vested, everyone's aligned, and you continue to just gain that momentum versus deliver, fall flat, and you continue to, push yourself back versus really catapult yourself into that just innovative and acceleration mode.
Absolutely. And I think this is typically a topic where everyone kind of knows already that, yes, it is about relationships. We need to build that trust. And hopefully now they are properly sold and motivated to find out how they could go about doing this. Or if you already have a model, how can you improve that? So let's see. As you reflected on this question after our first conversation and after the masterclass and insights from that, what have you identified as a good pathway to successful relationships? Can you just introduce your model?
Yeah, it's as I think through what matters. So as you're developing a relationship, whether it's with your colleagues, with your stakeholders, even personally, every time you go after a relationship and try to build that trust is, yes, it's so critical and important, but you have to care, right? So you have to have a little bit of element about caring about the work and caring about the people. So thinking about that, it's really the model that I think through is the C.A.R.E model. And a C.A.R.E model is communication, authenticity, reach, and empathy. And deploying each of these pillars in your relationship building strategy can, from my perspective, really set you up for a successful path to ensuring you have trust and the individual or the group that you're working with to deliver a solution that's aligned with their expectations.
So, C.A.R.E, so communications, then what was the second one?
Authenticity.
Okay. And then there was R?
Reach.
Oh, reach. Yes. Okay. And then we have empathy.
Yeah.
All right. So why don't we zoom in on each of those and, we can explore and see what's there. So communication. So what do you mean by communication here? It's one of those words that it's being thrown around, but communication, senior data analytics leaders looking to build these relationships to establish that rock solid foundation. What should communication mean in this context?
Yeah, I think for me, so communication, that's somewhat easier, right? Talk about the things that you're doing, communicate, overextend some of the reach of here's the status, all that. So that's basic communication. Whatever I think about communication and what's really important to this C.A.R.E model is communicating to the point of we're not overpromising. We are being extremely candid with any of our replies. And we're getting to a point where we are so lockstep with expectations and we're not overselling. So if someone says, hey, I would love this model and let's make it do this and this and this, And before even thinking, you say, absolutely, I can do that. That gets you in a point where you have communicated the solution that's potentially not possible if you're not really sure. And then later on, after you said absolutely not possible, you realize we don't have the data for that, or we don't have the technology to be able to achieve this. You've now underpromised on one of your stakeholders' commitments. So being able to communicate open and honestly, I think, is really important, and not being scared to say, I can't do this, or we don't have the technology to do this, or one of those words that I think not many people are willing to say, but I don't know. And being in a data role, it's okay to not know, or let me get back to you once I find out. But I think that whenever I say communication, I really mean being honest and not being scared to say that you don't know something, or not being scared to say that it's not a capability that's currently within the stack of capabilities, and just being transparent with whoever it is that you're talking with to ensure that you're all on the same page.
We always talk about this idea of how your data analytics function is essentially a business within a business, and you should treat it that way. So it's one thing, what are the products and services that you build? But then your client relationships are everything. I mean, they are the ones giving you clear visibility on what you should build in the first place. But also, you need to have the right kind of demand. As you said, in business, there is this term, always under-promise, over-deliver. Right? Under-promise, over-deliver, which a lot of times makes people uncomfortable, especially when we talk about storytelling. A lot of times you need to paint a compelling vision. And there's definitely a pitfall when you want to galvanize your stakeholder interest, right? You want to kind of pour some fuel on the fire and get them excited and inspired, but there is that risk of you pulling them into something and then you can't deliver. And the long term, because what you want to establish is trust. Even though it was so tempting to do it, it will buy you back in the long run. Now, a quick question, maybe a little bit tactical, but when you say you don't know, again, I know it can make people feel uncomfortable, especially in data analytics. I mean, aren't we the ones who's supposed to know? We are the purveyors of truth in the business, and we don't know, and then who knows? But how do you tell your stakeholders that you don't know without getting lost in technical detail? Like, for example, we don't know because, and then you can just get pulled into like a lengthy explanation of some model. So how do you keep the communication simple here? Do you have any best practices on saying, I don't know?
Yeah, I think that sometimes it can be as simple as, I don't know the answer to that. And you don't have to go into the reason why you don't know, because it's okay not to know. But then quickly flipping to, I will find the answer. So it's not honing in on why you don't know, honing in on, here's what I'm going to do to go find out and figure out a solution. So I think it's not getting lost in the fact that you don't have the insight, or you're saying, I don't know the answer to that, but instead flipping to, I'm going to go find that answer for you, and I'll get back to you as soon as I find an answer to whatever it is I don't know. So, I think that saying the reason to why you don't know something is not as important, because at the end of the day, you don't know and you don't have the answer for whatever reason, and it's okay to not know. But what's more important is having the willingness to go find the answer.
Mm-hmm. And also probably they don't even care why you don't know.
You just don't know. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter.
I really liked how you put being always lockstep with expectations. And I didn't actually expect you to take that angle, but I love it because communication, like communion, right? Being together. That's what it is. We now share a reality together. That's actually, stories are so powerful because it kind of puts us on the same page. We will be watching the same movie. It becomes the platform for communication, but always being lockstep with expectations. And business stakeholders, again, if you really want to know, because what they care about is not like amazing technology. Even if they think that they care about amazing technology, they actually don't. What they care about is their daily frustrations. They want to reach their goals. They want to hit their KPIs, and also those deep personal drivers that they have. So if they can have someone who they can trust and they can rely on, that's a huge asset. And if you can position yourself that way, that will just pay amazing dividends down the road. So that's the communication piece. Fantastic. So authenticity. What about authenticity? What does authenticity mean in this context, and why is it so important?
Authenticity, I think, for any leadership role or any role in general, it's so important to bring you to the table. It's so important to bring yourself. And what I find incredibly important, I think this is really less data oriented and more just leadership in general, but it definitely applies from a data lens, because you don't need to be so buttoned up. You don't need to put on this face of, I'm in a data role, I have to know the answers, kind of like that I don't know comment. And you can truly be yourself. And when you have the opportunity to bring yourself to whatever relationship that you're trying to build, you are fast tracking that connection and that collaboration, because you don't have to try so hard to be a version of yourself that you're not. And whenever you're not trying so hard to be something that you're not or someone that you're not, you can immediately establish that relationship and the connection versus focusing in on, I have to say these things, I have to do these things, I have to think about these things. It's just, hi, I'm me, and let's talk. So I think that's why authenticity is so important, where you take that persona or the vision of what a data leader should be, or, what should I say and do? It's more, I am a leader of this role, and I'm going to bring myself to the table, and let's just go from there.
And I really like this, because here it really becomes actionable. Because if let's say your advice would be, no, look, you got to be this person, and you got to make sure that whenever you show up for the stakeholders, they see you that way. I think apart from it just being misguided, it's also not really actionable, in the sense that it's unsustainable. You can't do that. You actually can't maintain that kind of fake posture over an extended period of time. It just doesn't work. So even when we talk about sales, by the way, when people want to establish good sales communication, when you're actually selling these ideas in a way that people want to be a part of that, there's just no way around real authenticity. So even with businesses who do have an authenticity problem in their communication, usually the thing that you need to do is to reposition the offer itself. You got to bake it in the cake, right? You can't really have a misalignment between what you actually have to offer and what you communicate. So I like that basically your take is to focus on you in this sense, this in a good way. And this is a question that I would have. So I guess here then your self-perception will be crucial. So how do you see yourself in the business in relation to your stakeholders? That's where it starts. And then when you embrace it and you own it, then you just need to show up.
Exactly.
So what is that vision? What is that posture that you yourself, you think, need to occupy? How do you think that data leaders should see themselves genuinely? And what kind of posture they should adopt so that authenticity shines through the right way, if the question makes sense?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the point of, as a data leader, you do have the access to a ton of different insights, and going into a room or understanding, needs from a stakeholder group, you are not the one that has all the answers. And in a data role, you do have the answers to some degree, because you have the data available to you, but you have the quantitative data, and understanding I have qualitative insights that I need to take in mind as well. So from that posture perspective, or how am I putting my best foot forward, it's like you said, it's self-reflecting. Who am I, and what is the version of me that I'm going to bring to the table? And it's myself. But also my perspective needs to be, I'm not the only one in the room that has insights. I'm not the only one with the information, because there are a ton of other people around the room that they may not have an Excel sheet or a tangible data set that says this is the answer, but they have the real life experiences, and they have the engagement with your customers. And, so as you think about that posture and what version, or what am I going to do to set myself up for success, I think it's that mindset of, I am going to listen, I am going to truly be myself, and I'm going to remember that there are valuable opinions around me that I need to kind of pull their authentic version of themselves out as well, so that we can all come to the table on an equal platform and equal understanding. And that's where you get those awesome brainstorming sessions, or you get some really innovative ideas when everyone in the room is authentic. You as an individual, you are assuming positive intentions. You're coming to the table with, the energy and the mindset that you would like to bring versus kind of thinking about this is what I should be in this setting versus what I really am. So I think that as you look to that keys to success, it's the mindset of I'm not the only input, I'm not the only insight, and also let's make sure that I'm being me, because whoever you are, whoever me is, you're a leader, you're in your role for a reason, and you should have the confidence to be able to have those conversations openly without those filters or bias of here's exactly what I think I should say. I will say, I'm not saying go into a room and be a bull in the china shop if that's where your mind's going. I wouldn't recommend that. But really just, have that collaborative mindset to get to that end solution.
And I think that's why when sometimes we have these conversations, there are these reframes. Like, for example, it shouldn't be called data literacy, it should be called data fluency. With data drivenness, I know it's kind of a made up term, but some people say that we shouldn't say data driven, we should say data informed. And some people roll their eyes and like, okay, these are just semantics. But data driven does suggest a different posture from a leadership perspective for you, because if your goal is to everyone to think about data all day long, and now everyone should start from data, and that's what they should live and breathe every day, it won't get you the results that you're actually looking for. So if you wanted to attain that, even so, aside from the fact whether you should or shouldn't aim for that, it won't bring about the results. But when you shift your perspective to how about I just make sure that everyone is data informed, how about making sure that the good news, the information reaches these individuals. Now, your role suddenly is on a whole different level. Now, as you said, your main job is to be a part of the conversation, to make sure that people actually embrace and understand what this data-drivenness is, and the actual data and how you got to the data and the platforms that you build and the services that you offer almost becomes like a side note to what you want to achieve together as a collective. And that's why when you get there, people think, oh, now I care less about data, or are we going to become less data-driven? It's exactly the opposite. And that kind of misalignment is, I think, what causes all this pain of, look, we're building these fantastic solutions, and we're just not getting the adoption that we're looking for, right? And people think, is it the model? Is it the technology? Is it because we don't have like an authoritative enough central data literacy project, which again can be very useful, right? But it's all about how you approach it. So, I love that. And that authenticity, you see, this becomes really actionable that way. Like, see yourself the right way, and then just really act it out during these meetings without like over obsessing about, how I should be seen right now. So that's fantastic. Reach. So when you said reach, when I asked you about the C.A.R.E model, and you said that we had the third one is reach, I love it already. I don't know what you have to say about that, but I know that this is a missing component often of how do you scale your message. Or actually, you tell me, so what do you mean by reach in this acronym?
Yeah, I mean, you were close. So scaling messages is kind of a factor of this, but as I think about reach with requests or with needs, so I have a model request, for example, I can come from one group or one function or even one individual, and the story isn't complete until you gain deep into the network and say, let me think about these other considerations. And that could be one individual example where you have a project and you shouldn't just say, I have a request, I'm going to intake that request and I'm going to output a model. But instead, I have a request, let me think about it. Let me tap into my network. Let me tap into the other functions that could potentially benefit from this so that it could really be a scalable solution. And that's what I mean by reach with relationships. It's siloing a team or an individual or a leader into a small group. I think that could sometimes be a barrier for success, because you want to be able to scale your reach or scale your network within your organization to understand full scope, end to end. Where are the impacts and what are some of the pain points? and establishing relationships in some non-traditional functions or areas could benefit that complete picture, so that as requests come in or new projects come in, you have gotten to the point where your network is so diverse and mixed with so many different points of view and perspectives that you could say, oh, this actually could benefit this person too. Let me talk to them and let me see if I layer that into this overall project. And, oh, I should think about this thing because I know, this person from this function, they've benefited for X, Y, and Z reason. So you start to connect the dots as you extend your network, and you don't have that tunnel vision of these are the people that I work with day in and day out. These are the only things I should think about. You now have a very complete picture of these are all the considerations that we need to make, and let's leverage that network to really get a scalable solution out the door versus a kind of a one-stop or one service function. It's really a wide reach scalable solution.
Yeah. So the networking element, in this case, networking means that you establish that network where you can basically plant that seed of the message for that to then really gain traction in the organization. Even on the masterclass, like one thing we talked about was the importance of champions, and someone who is looking to start that network and build that network. How do you think they should start? Do you have a particular approach to identifying your champions? Like what makes a good champion, and how do you start? Maybe we can just get an actionable tip somewhere there.
Yeah, I think champions can come from any direction. So the first suggestion that I would have is don't limit who you're putting in your champion bucket. So it doesn't have to be a specific type of role or a specific function. Really, anyone could be a champion for you or your team. And think kind of outside of the box is my first suggestion or first recommendation. And the other recommendation as far as how do I start, from my perspective, I think just asking the question of let's have a conversation, or I'd like to educate you on this. Let's grab time. That's the hardest part, right? It's getting the motion going and getting the ball rolling. But everyone is willing to learn, and everyone, you go to work wanting to do a great job. And I think everyone is willing to have conversations to begin those conversations. So I would say don't be scared to reach out. So if you have, this person would be really great to just talk to them and get their perspective, go do it. And don't think twice about it. Even if it's a leader where you're thinking, I don't think they want to even talk to me, more times than not, they're willing to take the time. It's just a matter of you have to initiate that conversation.
And if you think about it this way, when we talk about posture, for example, a lot of times we find, and you have to be like a consultative partner. And if you think about working with consultants, I think all of us have done that. I mean, at that level, you have been working with consultants in one way or another. Now, a consultant always brings a certain expertise, but at the same time, a good consultant asks the right questions. So they provide inherent value just by approaching you in a way that is authentically curious, and they ask calibrated questions that allow you to see certain things about yourself that you already knew, you were just not conscious of, and that in and of itself becomes valuable. So I know for a fact that when you can have a good conversation with someone, even if you don't end up having a solution that you can offer them, if you conduct that conversation the right way, it can be super short, the person will walk away with value that they did not have before. So just by knowing the right questions to ask, and those questions, whenever we talk about storytelling, good storytelling is all about getting to people's actual pains and frustrations and their real goals and desires. If all you do is to shine a light on that in a unique way, or it doesn't even need to be like incredibly special or unique, because people don't really they don't have the space and the time to think about these things. But when you approach them and they can articulate that because you help them to articulate through the right questions, even if you don't end up in a huge collaboration together, which you very well might end up being in a collaboration, but even if that doesn't happen, it was still valuable. So I love your advice of don't feel insecure about approaching people. Just make sure that you show up with the right intentions. Not like, oh, look, I gotta sell this person an analytics solution at all costs because I have to get this thing going in the company. It's a genuine conversation, ask the right questions, and if it's meant to be, then you will have some sort of collaboration that will bear fruit in the future.
Absolutely. And I think I love the idea that you had about you don't sell yourself, because you really don't. You don't need to sell your solution or use, let me get that credibility. It's almost like you flip the script and you say, how can I help you? Hey, what are your pain points? And you talk through more of those. Tell me about what I can do for you versus what I want you to do for me. And that's really, I think, a valuable conversation and a starting point for any of those conversations that you want to just introduce yourself or reach out to someone new for those champions.
And also to, again, maybe just an actionable tip that we found that works really well is that in these initial conversations, people don't really know much about data analytics, or they had some sort of experience before. But at this stage, it's almost enough to just create a little bit of intrigue, which is usually easy to connect back to, which is, look, things have been changing in business. There's this huge trend of data analytics. You might have heard about this. And a lot of our competitors are using this. They see amazing results. I'm here to identify opportunities to make your life easier. So are you open for a quick conversation so I can understand better what you do? And, if there's anything that we can do to help, that would position me well to investigate that. And just that kind of starts the conversation on the right note, what we found. And from that point on, really, when you find those champions who do have these high value opportunities for you, and connecting back to one of your previous points, you are lockstep with the expectations that they have, and you deliver. Now you have an advocate, and they will fight in your corner when you actually want to launch those bigger, more exciting initiatives in the company.
Absolutely.
So that brings us to the final point, which is empathy. It's almost like the underpinning of everything that we spoke about. Again, it's kind of like a buzzword that people throw around, kind of like emotional intelligence and empathy. Here's an actionable advice: be empathetic. But maybe we can break it down a little bit. Why is empathy important, and how does this become practical for data analytics leaders?
I think that empathy is so important. So with anything, of course, you want to be empathetic, you want to be caring for the people around you. However, in data roles, time is so precious, and it's always, you're under the wire to get things done and you quickly need to turn things around. And oftentimes it requires an army of people to do these things. So in scenarios where you're under the wire and you're working with tight deadlines, I think empathy is so important, because you don't know what's going on with the individuals, and you don't know where they're being factored in. So say you have a timeline that's important to you, it may not be important to them. And we need to really care about the people around us and understand that mistakes can happen. Data doesn't have to be 100% the first time around, and maybe there's a reason why it's not. And, at the end of the day, people are humans, and we can't put these tight pressure timelines around these whatever issues or actions that may not align with what your expectations were. So understanding it's okay to make mistakes. Let's get it better next time, or the model didn't meet the mark right away. Let's fail. Let's learn from it. Let's run. I think all of these are important to be empathetic and understanding about the people around you.
Absolutely. And I think this applies both to working with your team and make sure that they perform at a high level and they are super engaged and they care about their work on a day-to-day basis. But the same applies to the stakeholders that you're building these relationships with. I mean, in fact, if you do it the right way, there is a level of co-creation which kind of puts them in a very similar space as when you work with your team. Quick question on that. So, I don't know, do you guys use an agile framework by any chance for project management, or what is your approach to that?
Yeah, we definitely use agile. Yeah. So still early on in the days of agile, but we are certainly ramping up to that agile framework.
Okay. So with this, what I found is, we are a fresh company. We're growing quick, but I also found that I was always intrigued by agile, and we worked with it in some capacity. But it was actually one of our other community members, Pete Scherf from Swire Coca-Cola, who really sold agile in a way that made me see how it really helps you to be on the same page and make work more human, even though it's framework. So it's supposed to be something that's rigid. It should do the opposite. So what is your experience with Agile right now? Like you said that you're in the beginning of the journey, but do you have a best practice on how you implemented it in your company? With Agile, it's always different for every company. But did that help you to make work a little bit more human? And if so, then how do you see that?
Yeah, I think that from an Agile perspective, where we see that more human interaction, it's everyone's accountable for their own work and you're trusting them that they're doing their work. So from a prioritization perspective, from a timing perspective, so, you have a backlog of so many different things that you wish to get to, and Agile empowers the individuals that are doing that work to make the decisions on their own and say, yes, this is the thing that I'm going to work on now. And you are empowering each of those members to do that work without these rigid, this template. It's, here's a request, pull it in whenever you're ready to work on it. We trust that you're working on it and just go do it. And to me, that's much more meaningful as an individual, where I'm trusted and I have the ability to kind of choose my own journey, and work now becomes this thing that I can do and I'm kind of owning, versus I now have to, pre-Agile, it's rigid requirements, templates, all of these things that takes that human factor out of it, where it's just checking things off the list, and you become much more invested in what you're doing, and you care about what you're doing more when you have that empowerment and the ability to make the decisions on your own.
Absolutely. And this is exactly what I found too, that in general, projects tend to be like very abstract. It's not human at all. But when you bring it down to the daily level, again, like a storytelling practice of what is a day-to-day frustration? What is a day-to-day pain? What is it that people think about on a daily basis? Now, that's something that's human. And when you identify every single day, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is my goal for the day. And this is what blocks me from achieving that. It's such a simple thing, but it really initiates a conversation that kind of breathes life into these otherwise inanimate projects. So now that was interesting. I just wanted to see that whether you guys use Agile, because this is something that the community has been like very interested in, and different people have different approaches to that. So that's fantastic. If you don't mind, I will have a few quick questions. But before we dive into that, and I know that we're coming up. Oh, actually, I think we're already like up against the hour. Do you have like a few minutes more?
A few minutes for sure.
Oh, okay, great. So what would be your personal recommendation now? If you look at the decade that's ahead of us, everyone says that it's going to be the decade of data. I believe it's true. Data science analytics, people say that it's the sexiest profession of the 21st century. So a lot of people are motivated to become exceptional contributors in that space. What would be your advice and personal recommendation to aspiring leaders who want to achieve great things in this space?
I think for any aspiring leader, and in this space specifically, leveraging a lot of the things that we talked about, where data is one of the pillars for any data role. Of course, it's a big pillar. It's that foundation. But I think the advice is integrate the relationship aspect, integrate the human factor into your role to get that joint kind of superpower, and then deploy your capabilities. So as an individual contributor, you still have the ability to bolt onto that relationship aspect to then progress yourself as a leader. And you get to a point where you can practice what you preach, you can develop these relationships, and you now have a position and an impact where you continue to grow your career, leveraging not just what you know as a data oriented mindset, but you leverage your relationships as well, and you put data and relationships together. And I really do think that it's a superpower that can help any aspiring leader to be successful.
100%. And that actually, just like or two quick questions, I'm looking at some of the questions that have been asked in the community. And a good example of a day-to-day experience with relationships is resistance. So a lot of times you feel like, people are kind of resisting these data-driven, data-centric initiatives. So do you have a best practice on how you understand these sometimes fears or concerns on a deeper level with your stakeholders? And, you can be strategic, tactical, or whatever thoughts you have around this question of resistance.
I think anytime there's resistance, you continue to ask why until you get to a root cause. So there's always something, whatever that factor is, you can get to it by continuing to ask why. And it's not just pressing them, why, but you get to a point where you continue to ask those strategic questions to whoever it is that's feeling a bit resistant, to continue to peel back and kind of unpack what it is that's really driving that resistance, because there's always a reason. There's whatever, if it's a mindset, if it's a trust, whatever it may be, you can always get to that reason by continuing to ask. And, going back to the kids, it's whenever your kid asks you a question, they don't let go of that until they feel like they have the right answer. And utilizing that as a strategy for resistance, I think is so important to say, okay, why are you feeling this way? And you get your answer and you ask why about that one. And you continue to get to that core. And once you have your core, you and whoever that is that's resisting can align on a plan. You can either educate them, you can take their feedback, and you can integrate it into your strategy. And whatever it is, you now have something to go from, to take them from resistance to champion, at the end of the road.
Absolutely. And you kind of answered this question already, I think, in multiple ways. But if we look at this through the lens of organizational politics, I know it's one of those things that people care about a lot, because a lot of times their experience is that, it's difficult to navigate organizational politics. What do you think about this? So how do you navigate these complex human dynamics and politics that naturally come with promoting these data-driven initiatives? How should you approach the question of organizational politics, you think?
Yeah, I think that, at the end of the day, whatever makes sense. And as you think about questioning the organization itself or whatever it may be, it really goes down to that root cause and what makes the most sense. And if you can identify what makes the most sense, you can get your champions and you can get your group of people to help support that logical next step or logical, solution. So you need to tap into your network, you need to tap into your relationship, and you need to think big picture, not siloed, to start to navigate some of those areas. And it's really about that education factor, the storytelling factor, which I've had the opportunity to learn from the masterclass, but it's, you have to integrate all of these techniques to get to a place where you can overcome that challenge, and you come out at the end with a really great structure. You've got great alignment, you have champions, and it's no longer a speed bump. It's just, part of your everyday culture.
And you mentioned storytelling. So a quick question that with the rise of these AI-driven automation technologies, there's a fear of this job displacement, and this can actually kind of compromise your narrative in the business. So how can analytics leaders really address these concerns and help the organization to see automation as an opportunity rather than a threat? If I don't even know if that's like an issue for you guys on a day-to-day basis, but what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think I was reading an article, and I would love to cite it, but I can't. But I remember it stating that no technology has actually displaced a human workforce. And there could be elements and areas where it's like, okay, actually that's false, and this is why. But I think about technology as our friend. AI is our friend, and it's not something that we should shy away from. We should utilize it for productivity. So some of those, even those tasks where you've got to do a couple things over and over again, that could be automated for an individual that may say, oh, that's scary to me because that's part of my job, and I spend 50% of my time doing that. But on the flip side, you think through, well, if I don't have to do that, I can now spend 50% of my time doing something even more valuable. So as we think about AI, for me, it's let's embrace it. Let's use it. Let's understand how do we get more productive and get even more quality outputs from it. And it's not a factor of displacement or fear. It should be, how do we utilize it? And then what else do we go tackle after we don't have to do this thing that AI is replacing for us? So it's a 1 + 1 = 3 scenario. And whenever I think about AI versus a 1 + 1 = 0, as we think about, I don't know if the math there.
Yeah. But I get absolutely what you're saying. And this is our experience too. So even though I think just generative language modeling in all kinds of different applications, it did eliminate like 2 jobs in our company, and it opened up 5. So that's how it naturally works. So, it's all about that attitude. And then, look, final question, because I also want to be respectful of your time. And this was a lot of fun. But another question that comes up is that in this era of remote work, so how can analytics leaders maintain these strong relationships with their team and stakeholders? So do you have some strategies of effective communication and driving engagement and collaboration in a virtual environment?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have a large majority of my team who is remote, actually. And I think about this on a daily basis. So whenever COVID hit and we all were in a position where you have to go home and you have to be remote, of course, that was new. And now we're coming out of that, and it's no longer a new phase. And it's something that's just sticking with cultures and companies. And for my remote employees, especially my data group and, the folks that are actually doing the hands on the keyboard work, it could be exhausting to just be at your computer all day long and you don't have that people interaction where it's, yes, you love to do the heads down work, but you need the people aspect as well. And I think communication, even as corny as it seems, but just slacking someone or using, whatever communication that you have to just share funny things that happen over the weekend or get that human factor interjected into your team. Because otherwise it's, you sit in isolation, you sit at home and you only think about the project. So it's as a leader kind of forcing into that, the water cooler talk or, whatever you would get if you were in the office, putting that into more of a virtual environment. That has been something that I found really effective, and it continues to gain those relationships. And then of course it's over communication, making sure that you're thinking about hybrid environments and sharing screens, and just like you and I are both on video right now. But I think all of these are small initiatives that a leader can make to ensure their team is feeling part of that culture and feeling welcome, even if they're a remote employee.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were saying this, it made me reflect on, of course, there's just something that you can't do in a virtual environment that you can, as you said, like actually having a coffee together, smelling the coffee together, or doing like a whiteboard session. These things have their own magic. But also the virtual environment has their own unique capabilities. So I'm just thinking that, for example, something that we used to do, and I think we should do more again, is in-house memes that we did. So it's like actual things that we work on, and some of these funny day-to-day experiences translated into memes. It's like one of those, and GIFs have their power as well. So use them wisely, I guess.
Yeah, I think all those, it seems like, oh, this is a waste of time, but it's really not. I mean, it's so important to filter in that relationship aspect for remote employees that are in the office with you, whoever it is. I think that's just such a incredible part of leadership that it can't be deprioritized. It has to be your daily priority is engaging your people.
Absolutely. And Danielle, this was a lot of fun. Thank you very much. I think, the superpower now is public. It's in the public domain. And this C.A.R.E model, we will shamelessly promote it from now on, always referencing you. So it's the Danielle Gentry C.A.R.E model, trademark, or everything that needs to be there. And yeah, I love it. And I'm glad that, our conversation did have this fruit, and appreciate your contributions to our community, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great, and it's been fun. So I appreciate you inviting me to the conversation, and I hope that others find benefit from this superpower of the C.A.R.E model.
I know they will.